It's episode 35 of the second season of the Exit Philosophy podcast. He is Rich Griffin. I'm Scott MacArthur, and we are coming to you. We are laboring on Labor Day Monday. It's the lunch hour, Eastern Standard Time, or Daylight Time, whatever it is. On Monday, September the 2nd, the Blue Jays are off today. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will not be playing on a national holiday. Nobody freak out. They lost 2 out of 3 in Minnesota, and they've got one of their shorter homestands of the season coming up. 2 games with the Philadelphia Phillies, with an off day Thursday before they go back on the road to play the Atlanta Braves. Griff, they didn't hit on Friday. They got a season's worth of damage done on Saturday, and it looked like they were going to win the series until the 8th inning on Sunday when Royce Lewis broke a bit of a home run drought for him and took Chad Green deep for a 3-run bomb after some shoddy defense earlier in the inning. Kind of get what you get with a young baseball team, right?
Yeah, the home run by Royce Lewis sort of gave flashbacks to the postseason series last year, and there were questions in the Sunday game. I mean, it's the rubber game of the series, and they have a chance to win, and you know they want to see what their young players are doing. But like honestly, Vlad gets the day off, and I don't think there's anything physically wrong with Vlad, but he gets the Sunday off. He's not even available. He doesn't have his jersey on. He's not even available to hit when they get down by a run in the 9th inning. And nobody's available to pinch run for Brian Serven at second base, or even to pinch hit for Brian Serven when he drew a walk or got hit. I think he got hit, whatever it was, he reached base. There's nobody available to play third base instead of the kid who threw the ball into right field and then turtled when Addison Barger's one hop throw came back to third. And like Vlad had Sunday off, he's got Monday off, he's got Thursday off, and there's only 4 weeks left in the season. I just don't get it. Maybe it's just me, but I think that fans are paying a lot of money, not for the game in Minneapolis, but they are. And there's a lot of interest in seeing how the team does down the stretch with the young players. But Vlad is having an epic Vlad season. And I think you want him in, if it's possible, you want him in as often as possible the rest of the way.
Yeah, so there's also an integrity of the game argument. And I'll admit before I throw this out there that I really don't know where I stand on the integrity of the game argument. If a team like Cleveland or Kansas City theoretically were to have an issue with the Blue Jays running a bunch of kids out and then not making lineup changes later in the ball game to try to win a game over the Minnesota Twins, and that has an effect in some way on the American League Central standings, I get it, but also my response to Cleveland and Kansas City would be, go win more ball games. And if you win more ball games than the Twins, as they have done so far this year, they're going to finish ahead of Minnesota. The flip side, Griff, is if you look at the rest of the Blue Jays schedule, after Philadelphia and Atlanta, you've got the New York Mets, who are still in the National League wildcard race. You got the Cardinals, who are now behind the Cubs in the NL Central. Like, I think the Cardinals are done. You've got the Texas Rangers, who essentially are done. You've got the Tampa Bay Rays, who are done. You've got the Boston Red Sox, who are playing for something, and you've got the Miami Marlins for the final 3 games of the season, and they were done on April 10th. There are a lot of teams that are done. So if you want to give all the veterans, be they actual geezers like George Springer or younger veterans like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the collective day off, I see a lot of games coming up in September where the opposing team is in the same boat and you're not screwing with contending teams by running out your kids. I'm not upset about it. This team is not trying to win. They're trying to get data on their younger players to head into the offseason and prepare for 2025. but I can see where there might be some upset about integrity, given that the Twins are playing for something.
Yeah, the word integrity is a key, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I wrote a column earlier in the week on griffsatpitch.com about how the new rules over the last few years have helped the integrity of the game. It's not very often that we praise something that Major League Baseball has done, but in terms of the month of September, the expanded playoffs, and the fact that they're only allowed 28 roster players in the month of September. I think that it's really worked out for the integrity of the game because when it was 40-man rosters and say one wild card and you had 4 teams from each league making it to the postseason, there were too many times where one of the 20 non-contending teams was playing one of the 10 contending teams and playing all their kids from the minor leagues. And that, to me, impacted the integrity of the game. It's like you saying that there's plenty of time for Vlad and others to sit later in the season against teams that are also Rans at this point of the season. But back in the old days, and I'm talking like 3 or 4 years ago, back in the old days, when there were 40-man rosters and there was no 3-batter limit, those games took 3.5, 4 hours regularly in September because you had so many options, so many players. But the thing that allows them to go to 28 players, because the original rules back in the old days, when farm systems were just being made, when spring training facilities were haphazard and were just diamonds to get the fat guys down to playing weight in time for opening day. But now, if you've got good young players like the Jays are playing a lot of right now, you have the spring training facility with all the the 12 months a year they're in action, they're serviceable, they have all the latest in conditioning and physical requirements, they got the labs for pitchers and hitters. So you've got that for your young players. You got the Arizona Fall League, which didn't used to exist, and you send guys. And I have a feeling Jonathan Clase is going to be one of those guys going to the Arizona Fall League instead of coming up here like he would have done in the past. But you have all these other improvements in player development, and that allows you to get down to 28 players instead of 26. So you're only adding one position player and one pitcher. And it also allows that when you play a team that's contending, you have to play at least 8 of the guys that you've had all season. And I think that is a tremendous improvement in terms of preserving the September integrity for other teams and for the fan bases of the 28 teams or the 20 teams that are non-contending. Because if you pay for a September weekend series and you go and you've got the AAA guys, if you got the Buffalo guys playing here or all the teams that you mentioned that are not in contention anymore, all their minor leaguers, it's not, you feel like you're not getting your money's worth. But integrity is a key, and there are some aspects where the integrity is being preserved and some aspects where the integrity is being stomped on like cheap red wine.
You have a particular brand in mind?
The kind
We'll just say boxed wine, Griff. Boxed wine.
Oh, my daughter loves boxed wine. I won't say that.
Okay, you're not going to diss boxed wine? Let's go through. So to set this up, and
Jays are 16 and 11 in the last stretch.
They're 16 and 11, and that includes 7 and 0 against the powerful Los Angeles Angels.
Right.
But I'm not taking anything away.
As you were saying, to set it up,
you play the teams you play, but I don't want to come across as negative Nelly here, and that is not the intent, and I think nor do you, Griff. But instead of being negative Nelly, we're going to ask you, good listener, to hear us as realistic Ronnie. So we're not being negative Nelly, we're being realistic Ronnie. And we're going to have a conversation now about each of the young players that the Blue Jays have been using often, really since the trade deadline. They are names that if you've been following this team through the month of August, you've become very familiar with. Their successes and their peaks and valleys have varied, obviously, depending on each player. And look, the people employed by the owner of the baseball team did not anticipate having to cover a team or broadcast for a team that fell so badly flat on itself this season. I think everybody thought Labor Day rolls around, we're looking at magic numbers, we're looking at division or wild card standings, blah, blah, blah. What we have instead is what we've been witnessing. And so there are a lot of young players who are being introduced to you in the most glowing of terms, because what else is there to talk about in such a demoralizing and lost season? Realistic Ronnies, Griff and I are now going to have a conversation about these guys, and what it doesn't mean we're going to end up being right, but what the realistic expectation should be for each player's role on the 2025 roster.
And
Because I
beyond.
think a lot of people are playing with sample sizes and saying this guy's going to start and that guy's got a position and he's going to start. And I just don't think that that's the right way to go about this, Griff.
Yeah, so we'll talk 2025 and beyond. We'll alternate. I'll read out a name and you go first, and then I'll respond. I'll read out another name. I'll go first, and then you'll respond, and we'll go down. I think there's 8 or 9 guys. So it's just random order, but let me start, and you respond to Nathan Lucas.
Awesome year at Buffalo. Guy is based on his age. If he's going to have an opportunity, it's got to happen now. He has earned the right to have this September look. I think you could make the argument that he earned the right to have a longer look than that. He has been up before. He was up for a period of time last year. I would say he's competing for a roster spot in spring training next season with no promises. Because Griff, he's not a starting outfielder for me. He can earn that, and he can earn that with success early next season if he makes the team. He can increase his playing time, increase the trust the manager and the coaching staff have in him, increase his responsibilities. But he doesn't go in as a starter for me, especially when 2 of your 3 outfield spots are locked in and you need a bat to fill that 3rd spot. You need, presumably in free agency, maybe via trade. So at best, for Nathan Lucas, he's competing for a roster spot.
Yeah, I say he's a legitimate 4th outfielder. You mentioned his age. He's 30 years old already. He's been around for a long time. He plays both corner outfields fairly well. And as a left-handed hitter, now that Kevin Kiermaier is not in the equation, he probably would have made the opening day roster this year, but except that Varsho and Kiermaier both hit left. But with George Springer and Varsho back, there's an opening for a legitimate 4th outfielder. They entered this season without a legitimate 4th outfielder. They had infielders who could play the outfield, like Davis Schneider. But I agree with you. I think that at best, if he's starting every day, then this is not going to be a contending team in 25. So as a 4th outfielder, he can contribute. He can fill in for 3 or 4 days, and he can play both corners. So I think that he has a chance to make it. And then that's if they keep him around, because outfield seems to be a depth now within the farm system. So we'll see, but he's not going to be a starting outfielder in 2025.
Okay, so we agreed we'd just do this randomly, but when one name shares a topic with another name, it just makes sense to continue the dialogue. So I'll throw the next name at you, Joey Loperfido, who presumably would be in the mix with Nathan Lucas for this fourth outfield spot.
Well, I think even beyond that, since it's my turn to go first, I feel even beyond that, there's a lot of people who feel he's in competition to be a starting left fielder. And I just don't see that. I don't feel that. I feel Derek Fishery. I feel Bradley Zimmery. I feel Socrates Brito-y.
You need some Allevi
I, I
and
need
some aspirin-y.
I need to see more from a guy that was one of three players thrown into a deal by the Houston Astros who have seen more of Joey Loperfido than we have, than the Blue Jays have. So it seems like for 10 starts of Yusei Kikuchi, that it's very unlikely that a very intelligent and successful Astros organization would have thrown three important pieces for 2025 in to the Blue Jays mix. So I see Loperfido as competing for a fourth outfield spot, but if he's ever going to be a starting outfielder, I would say he needs to go to Buffalo and prove himself like Lucas has done over time. And he's young enough where half a season or more than half a season at Buffalo wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, and I'm trying to come up with different ways to ensure that I don't sound repetitive with a lot of these guys, Griff. I just think it's irresponsible to assume that even a good 2 to 2.5 month stretch from any of these guys means that they're locked into a starting role, or penciled in, at least. There's always an eraser with a pencil, but penciled into a starting role with the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays. There's only one name, and we'll get to him, that I'm even going to suggest as a possibility there. But like Joey Loperfido struck out in half of his first 40 some plate appearances for the Blue Jays. That does not define him as a major league hitter, nor does the bounce back. We're going to have to see a longer sample size here to get a true sense. And I agree with you about more seasoning in order to become potentially an everyday Major League Baseball player. But here's what I know, Griff, because they're trying next year, right? And we know that their actions always match their words. They're trying next year. The left fielder for the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays had better not be on the roster right now, because the center fielder is, and based on his contract, the right fielder, George Springer, is. So Varsho and Springer, two of the three. The starting left fielder for the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays had better not be on the roster right now. That's just if you're going for it.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. They're getting a look, and there are three alternatives, and one of them would be that they show enough that they become important pieces in terms of trade value, and you look for that guy who's not here right now, who's going to be your left fielder, who's going to supply a consistent performance at the plate and 25 to 35 home runs. Hopefully you can find that guy, and if it requires some of these guys that they're watching, that fans are watching play for the Blue Jays right now, then so be it. It needs to be done. It can't be somebody, left fielder cannot be somebody who's on this current roster right now. I'll throw out another name and you can start. Spencer Horwitz.
You were listening to my, because you know how I feel about Horwitz. So you were listening to my little.
I don't want people to think we're just in this for the negative.
We're realistic Ronnies. We're not negative Nellies. We're realistic Ronnies. I did say in an earlier, maybe the last time I spoke, that there's a name that I would put forward as a potential starter for the Toronto Blue Jays in 2025. Now, where exactly on the diamond that is, or if he is comfortably seated in innings where the Blue Jays are on defense as the designated hitter, that's to be seen. Spencer Horwitz can hit. And look, we might have felt the same way about Babe Schneider a year ago, and we've seen him struggle as the league has adjusted to him, and that very well could happen with Spencer Horwitz. And we know that Spencer's gone through some dips, but you would expect that of any player who's just getting his feet wet at the major league level. He's a left-handed bat. He has pretty good plate discipline, and he can hit the odd home run, Griff. I like this player. I like his approach in the batter's box. Is he perfect? Of course not. But I do think the Toronto Blue Jays have something here that is worth exploring on a much longer leash. I think he has earned that right.
Yeah, I think that Spencer Horwitz is a major league player right now, but I think that maybe as a primary DH, if his role is primarily as a DH, because I see every time he plays first base, there's a play that he doesn't make that Vlad, in all his athleticism and wild bull in a china shop defense, would have made. So if you have a choice between those two players, unless Vlad is playing third, then first base needs to belong to Vladimir Guerrero until they are competitive or eliminated. So at this point of the season, we don't need to see Vlad play first base every day, but starting on opening day of 2025, you should see Vlad at first base unless he's playing third. And the only reason he would be playing third is not because they want to give first base to Spencer Horwitz, is because they go out and get a legitimate basher to play first base, a Pete Alonso. I mean, I'm just throwing a name out there, but somebody who has knocked Vlad to third base, and it's not going to be Spencer Horwitz. So he can't play second base that well, although it may be better position for him if he wants to be a starter for the Blue Jays. But he makes mistakes on the base. He doesn't seem to have the baseball instincts that some of the other young players might have. But he's a major league player. His bat plays, he hits left-handers, he gives good at bats against left-handers, but they just need to find a position. And if they can't, the only position that he could possibly play is second base, but DH as a 3/4 of the time guy would be the best.
Yeah, I would say spend the winter in Dunedin taking ground balls at second base and mock turning double plays.
Yeah.
You know, just put the work in. And we'll see if something comes of that over time. But I do like Spencer Horwitz.
Who you got?
I'm trying to see. I mean, there are three names left we have on our list. I'll go with the one who probably out of the three we would think we'd pick last. But I'll throw Leo Jimenez out at you right now.
One of the 3 times that Ross Atkins was available this season was in July, early July, and he mentioned Leo Jimenez as somebody who could help. Somebody asked, is there anyone on the farm who could help right now? And he jumped in with Leo Jimenez. That may have been setting up the possibility that Bo wouldn't be there next year. I think Bo might have, at the time, had his first calf injury. So maybe he was thinking of that. But seeing enough of Leo Jimenez, and he's a very athletic. When he comes to the plate, he looks like he belongs in the batter's box. He made that tremendous catch in Minneapolis where he went through the netting and made the catch at second base. He is a shortstop. I don't think he's an answer as an everyday shortstop. I think Bo needs to be there for 2025. So that gives another season of development for Jimenez, and we'll see what we got from there. But he's not an answer for trading Bo and then filling in with Jimenez. Yeah, that's all I got. He's got time to develop. He's a good young player, but he's not ready to be on a contending team as they want to be in 2025.
Right. And there are other names to come in this conversation, Griff, who I think are further ahead in terms of their development as guys with the potential to fill this role. And then there's another name on the list, or excuse me, there's another name who is not on the list that we need to include for the purposes of a Leo Jimenez-like conversation, which is Ernie Clement. You know, Clement's a guy who I think has shown the Blue Jays good athleticism and can give you a pretty good at bat and is a pretty solid utility player. So, you know, what's Leo Jimenez's ceiling? Can't answer that question yet. But on a team that's trying to contend in 2025, he's in the minor leagues still seasoning his game. And he's a call up if you run into the injury bug or some such thing and you need him. He can play a good week and a half of baseball for you. But this is a young guy who's still learning the game.
Yeah, I agree 100% that Ernie Clement is your backup infielder, middle infielder, third base, plays a really good shortstop. He's your guy, but if he has to play every day, then you're not a contender.
Right.
And so, yeah, that doesn't leave room for a second backup guy who's Leo Jimenez. So we'll go on from there. I'll give you one more. Well, we got a few more, but Will Wagner. What do you think of Will Wagner?
So just on the whole Clement Jimenez thing as well, not that this is at the top of the list of the reasons why Jimenez isn't there, but right-handed bats. So now we get into a Will Wagner who hits left-handed. And, you know, where is he with his defense? He's actually older than Vladdy, so I should be careful with using the term young, but again, when we talk about young, we're referring to major league experience. He's a young guy who is still developing. He came out of the gate on a tear. Wonderful story. It started that first night in Anaheim. It's pretty cool, just simply optically, to see a guy like Billy Wagner, the father, wearing a Toronto Blue Jays cap. You know, the guy who threw 100 plus before it was fashionable to throw 100 plus, the old Astros and Phillies closer. Where Will Wagner fits, I lump him in with the Lucas Loperfido group who come to spring training next year on the 40-man roster and have to earn it, Griff. You know, and Wagner's going to have options, right? And we always got to remember, too, that guys with options, if all things are equal and there's a guy with options, which is to say he can be sent to the minor leagues without being exposed to irrevocable waivers, versus a guy who is out of options, who has to be waived and taken off of the 40-man roster before he can be sent to the minor leagues and claimed by another team and you can't get him back, the default is going to go to the guy without options. And so I think Will Wagner's job in the next month is to continue to show well of himself, have a good offseason, improve in all areas, show that he's able to adjust to what pitchers are trying to do to him, work on his defense in the offseason, come into spring training and give it all he's got. But he's not a starter next year on a contending team, and he's in competition for a role on a contending team, and maybe a guy who racks up some gas miles between Toronto and Buffalo next year.
Yeah, Will Wagner reminds me in a lot of ways of Edouard Julien with the Twins, because he's got a line drive bat, left-handed hitter, some weaknesses on defense. You notice that Julien's road to the major leagues has not been smooth. He's been sent down several times to the minors. His arm, Wagner's arm is a little short. He can't play the left side of the infield. He can't play third base or shortstop because of his arm. And we've seen him struggle to throw guys out at first base from behind second and when he has to leave his feet and get to his feet. We've seen that. And that's something that is kind of harder to work on than just than your glove and your range and your positioning. That's harder to work at. It's a physical thing. And I'm not sure whether that can be done. So as a starter in 2025, no. Just look at the path that Julien has taken, and he's played on the weekend, but he didn't play every game. And they believe he can be a major league hitter. He already is. And Wagner had the advantage, like many of the sons of major leaguers that we've seen with the Blue Jays and around baseball, where he grew up in a clubhouse. in a major league clubhouse. So nothing intimidates him. We've seen pitchers make adjustments already to Wagner in terms of pitching to him. We've seen defenses where in his first few games, ground balls were going through because the positioning wasn't quite up to having been scouted fully. We've seen now hard ground balls that are turned into outs off of Wagner. He got 5 hits, which boosts all of his numbers, and 2 of them he admitted in the post game. Well, maybe that's not quite a 5-hit game because 2 of them were against Kyle Farmer, who was lobbing 40-mile-an-hour pitches in there, and even had Ernie Clement bat left-handed, just because of the ludicrous nature of having a guy lobbing 40-mile-an-hour loopers, eephus pitches in for strikes. So the bottom line on Wagner is great line drive bat, good knowledge of what it is like to be a major leaguer. But if he starts at second base in 2025, they're not contending. We've got a lot of these analyses that are quite similar because there are some talented guys out there. We're seeing it. But in terms of trying to skip that year of a rebuild, which most teams who are rebuilding, who are disappointing failures one year, need, or they choose to take 2 years to put a contender on the field. But we've gone through this over the previous episodes of Exit Philosophy, that they can't afford, the Blue Jays front office can't afford to have a 2-year rebuild or a 3-year rebuild. They need to do it right away. And they're going to have to do it in a hurry. They might have to use some of these players as trade chips. But if they have the same 26-man roster out there on opening day of 2025, then this is not a contender.
No, and we also need to be clear, at least me, I picked this team to win 85 games with the original roster. So that your playoff possibilities are dependent upon what the other teams in your league are doing, right? Like that I didn't think this offensive lineup was any good at the start of the year, and that proved to be true. So this lineup is just young kids. There's no way it's coming back as is because it can't.
I chose 85 to 89 wins. I didn't think they were going to be better, but I thought that 85 to 89 would, with the pitching that they had and the run prevention, which Ross Atkins has since admitted was a mistake in last winter's rebuild or reload, was that they stuck to their run prevention guns instead of going out and getting boppers who maybe weren't quite as good defensively. Yeah, he admitted that was a mistake, but that's like hiring your lawyer and finding out he's a good plumber.
Yeah, you like that line.
I do.
We've heard that one before. All right, last name for you guys of consequence. And you look at his build and you're like, if baseball didn't work out for this guy, he could probably go play free safety for an NFL team. I don't know if he ever played football, but I would guess maybe in high school. But Addison Barger is another left-handed hitter, and the last name on our where are they at among the young kids list, Griff.
Yeah, I'm when he came up and he was 0 for 18 in his first stint, he looked lost at the plate, swinging hard. I don't think he ever gets cheated on a swing. But since then, and then he came back and was 0 for 3, so he's 0 for 21 starting out. But since then, he still doesn't get cheated on swings, but he's got better control of his own strike zone. He hits the ball hard whenever he hits it. His arm from third base, I see him more obviously as a third baseman if he's going to be on this team. I think, honestly, he's got a chance to be considered as a starting player if he goes to spring training and shows improvement over that. But his arm and his hands in terms of fielding ground balls are good enough, and his bat speed and his aggressiveness and his power are enough to put him in my picture in terms of if you get two players at other positions that can also supply power and the correct handedness, as Ross Atkins likes to say, I think he's got a role on the 25 team, and I wouldn't have said that before the All-Star break.
Yeah. So, I mean, take a bigger picture view with this. They need a starting left fielder, right? Because Springer's going to be in right and Varsho's in center. They need a second catcher, and they need a second catcher who can play a fair number of games. I would argue a second catcher who is more than just day game after night game or personal catcher for a guy in the rotation.
Yeah.
Because
And there are always dozens of catchers out there every winter. So I don't think they can afford to bring Danny Jansen back, much as I love him, in terms of if they're going to add offense to other places and give Vlad his money. They can't bring Danny Jansen back, but there's comparable catchers who have caught a half season or more in their careers that will be out there. And I don't think Brian Servin is the answer.
No. So, but just going through their positions of need, they've got to get a guy who can, because you're going to want a pinch run for Alejandro Kirk in the seventh inning of tie ball games and stuff like that. You need a guy who, in case his lineup spot comes around again in a game like that, who isn't just an automatic out. And if he's going to play 75 games, he's can't be an automatic out, blah, blah, blah. They also need a second baseman and a third baseman. I mean, I guess I'm resigned to the fact that this front office is doing it again next year. It just baffles the hell out of me, but I'm not in charge. And quite frankly, I don't know if the people who are in charge are paying any kind of attention. But if they're back, they're certainly not going to be coming into 2025 without a defined starting second baseman and starting third baseman like they did this year. That just doesn't work. And I know there's this world we live in now of positionless players. So you see it in basketball, right? Where there's a 6'7" point guard, and you see it in football where a guy is either labeled a running back or a wide receiver, but he's often in motion before the ball is snapped, and he could be considered either. Well, hey, this guy can play third, he can play second, we can throw him in left when we give this guy a day off, blah, 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 blah. They need more clearly defined infielders. And so Griff, Addison Barger for me, if I'm going to be a little gracious and say, okay, I hear what you're saying, there's a possibility that he's a starter. Addison Barger for me only has a chance to start if they decide to go into spring training, or whether they decide or not, if they don't get the person or people they're looking for, either in trade or free agency, if they happen to have an open spot, say at third base, and then he can compete for it. But in a perfect world, that's not happening.
Yeah, I don't think second base and third base they can fill internally both of those going into 25. So if they got second base, third base, left field, DH, and we won't even include second catcher because that's a given and it can have different skill sets. But those four positions, they need to go outside the organization, I would say, for three of them.
Yep.
Like, if Bo is back at shortstop, or if he's traded, it has to be for somebody who can help right now at one of those three positions.
Maybe two.
Well,
his value's down though.
If you're filling one of the four positions of need internally, and I'm saying that a guy like Barger has a chance to be that one out of four, then you need to go outside and get a second baseman, left fielder, and DH. That's all there is to it if they want to contend in 25. If you want to see the same sort of results where the other day Vlad was not playing, it was his previous load management off day, and I wasn't interested in watching the game because I just want to see, and in that dugout they're saying how many players before Vlad comes up again, and if he's not in there, then you're seeing all of these guys that we're speaking about, none of whom is going to be the leader offensively. They're complementary pieces. You need to go out and get two more leaders offensively, another player who can contribute offensively, Vlad, Bo, and then what we're seeing in August and September with the Blue Jays, you pick and choose from among that group for the complementary pieces.
How about our guy, Bowden Francis?
Yeah.
See, so we are the Bowden wagon. Like, we have been on the Bowden wagon the whole time. And then, as we talked about last week, a little bit sheepish in early April when it didn't go well against the Astros and he struggled out of the gate and then he got hurt. And it's like, oh, geez. We believe something's in there, Griff. And I also don't want to go too far the other way based on 3 starts. But
Yeah,
how many pitchers?
more than 3. Yeah. But it's
no, but like, especially the last 3 starts where like he's no hitting teams deep into the ball game. He's been good for longer than that, but these last 3 starts of his have been ridiculous. And there are great pitchers for a long time. Again, I understand sample sizes, so please don't come at me. I understand small, I understand large. Seen them all. This small sample size of 3 games, there are really good major league pitchers who do it for a lot of years who don't have 3-game stretches like Bowden Francis is having, Griff. They just don't.
Yeah. And I think that might be as important a development for this organization in 2025 as anything else. If Bowden Francis can continue not on the same role, but if he can show the rest of the month of September that he belongs in the major league rotation, and there's no reason to believe that he won't at least be major league average for the rest of the month. Then you go into spring training of 2025 and you look at Gausman, Barrios, and you know that I would like to trade Bassitt away and get something in return, because not only would you save the Bassitt money for 25 and use it somewhere else, but Bowden Francis could step in and be a third starter there. And then you got, what can I do with Yariel Rodriguez? And I believe that going into 2025, that Yariel Rodriguez's best role for a contending team would be as a 2 or 3 inning guy, maybe even an 8th inning guy, because he's got the short-term stuff. He showed that even in his starting roles, that he's better in a short burst than he is going into the 5th, 6th, and 7th inning. So why not, as a contender or a wannabe contender, take advantage of that? You've got him for 3 more years after 2025. He's locked up in contract for 3 more years after that. Why not have him work his way into a starting role, much as Pat Henkin did, Jimmy Key? There are other examples, not recently.
Al Leiter, although that was a different situation.
Everything is accelerated these days. You want guys to be immediate successes, but it's not the only formula for getting a guy to become a solid starting pitcher. And I think Yariel Rodriguez, the emergence of Bowden Francis would allow you to do that in 2025.
You mentioned Chris Bassitt. I was just thinking to myself, the next time you go grocery shopping, Griff, and you're pushing the cart around, walk like you're Chris Bassitt leaving the mound after an inning or after he's handed the ball to the manager and he's trudging back to the dugout, and see how many people stare at you scared at what they think you might do next.
I'd be talking to my head of lettuce.
To reaching for that thing on your belt. And just like, oh my God.
He's a bizarre young man.
Well, I give him credit though. I mean, there's another guy who didn't have it figured out in his 20s, late 20s, early 30s, kind of put it together and ended up making good money.
But he finally got it figured out. But now he believes that nobody else is as smart as he is, which is, from our past episodes of Exit Philosophy, that riles me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've always said
the roof being closed and it changes the movement on his
body. God. Well, we know who that harkens us back to. right? That was the old R.A.
R.A.
Dickey. My,
R.A. Dickey, who almost drowned in the raging waters of the Missouri River, and the guy that rescued him doesn't remember it.
Grant Belfour.
He didn't remember.
Yeah, the reliever.
Yeah.
The reliever.
I went up to him in Oakland to write a column about it because it was the first time that R.A. had been in the same ballpark as Grant Balfour. And I went up because it was in the book, the incident was in the book where R.A. was trying to prove a point. He was young and like wild, and he was trying to swim across the Missouri River in the minor league days, AAA. And he went washed downstream. He was going to end up in the silt of New Orleans if Grant Balfour hadn't pulled him out of the river in Kansas.
Someone asked Belfour, he's like, what?
I asked him.
Oh, you did? Okay.
To write a column on it. And then he said, I don't, I said, I can't write a column.
That feels like something you'd remember, if you went through that.
Yeah.
I remember, and so Dickey and I,
out of the river in his underwear.
Yeah, Dickey and I ended up getting along. Griff. It took a while.
Yeah,
it took a while for him to warm up to me or whatever. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, these guys can. I get it. We're the friggin' leeches on their rear ends in the whole deal. But before we had established a rapport that I would call healthier, which took about a year and a half. So 2013 and like about June of 2014, I think it changed.
Well, doctors in the Middle Ages used leeches to make people healthier.
That's right. Yes, there you go. We're saviors at the end of the day.
I digress back to the Middle Ages.
I remember we are in Minneapolis in April of 2014. And we had just been in Baltimore where it was, mid-April and early spring. It's like 20, 22 degrees on the mid-Atlantic coast. It's nice. We go to Minneapolis and the temperatures are below freezing. And one of the games was frozen out, like snowed and frozen out. So we come back on getaway, or what was going to be the third and final day of the series, for a doubleheader. And Dickey was scheduled to start the game that got frozen out. So we find out it's going to be a doubleheader the next day after the game got banged. So I walk up to RA because I figure, well, I can't ask him this tomorrow morning because he's the starting pitcher tomorrow afternoon. He won't be available. And I asked him if he felt like he would be able to effectively throw his knuckleball in these conditions, because the forecast for the next day was to be about 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit with a wind chill, like not pleasant. Go look at your longitude latitudes on your map, folks. Minneapolis is north of Toronto, north and west of Toronto. It's up there, kids. And he kind of looked at me like I had 8 or 9 heads and had asked him the stupidest question in the history of the world. And he made some comment like, I believe that I possess the capabilities to work in this weather, or like whatever it was. Go out the next day, he throws 4 2/3 innings, 100 pitches. He didn't have a very good stat line. Go back and look at it on Baseball Reference. And after the game, he more or less said, yeah, I couldn't feel my fingertips. And I'm standing there, I'm like, look, I may look stupid. I may behave stupidly 75% of the time, but there's a part of me that isn't stupid. And I know you use your fingertips for your knuckleball, and I know your hands are going to freeze on that field today. Anyway.
Well, R.A. Dickey, I love talking about R.A. Dickey because I love dealing with him. I mean, there's a guy that 200 innings was a floor. And nowadays, if you reach 200, you'd be the most durable guy in the game.
And he got crapped on. He got crapped on, Griff, because of what they gave up for him. But you know what it changed for us? In 2014, us being him and me, in 2014, you'll remember the Jays had that red hot May where Juan Francisco suddenly became Babe Ruth. And then the league realized, hey, if we throw this guy curveballs, he's not going to look like Babe Ruth, other than in stature. And so that kind of went to hell. They had a great May, and then they came home and things were still good. until the Cardinals came in interleague play, and Jaime Garcia and a couple of others shoved it, and they started on this long losing streak. But we're in the clubhouse before that first game against the Cardinals when things are still going well. And so Dickey was sitting at his locker. He wasn't pitching that day. I go up to him and I just like, hey, RA, like it's been a pretty good month, blah, blah, blah. And I just sort of, we're going back and forth. I'm like, dude, you got to understand this city, this country, but this city, if you guys do this and take it into August, September, it's been waiting 20 years to care again. You're going to see what it's like. And he's like, yeah, you know, because I think he's still, you know, the Mid-South American in Canada. Are these people really tuning in? Do they understand what they're watching? The whole ignorant deal, blah, blah, blah. And then I said to him, because he has talked about this, right? He remembers being a young, like 12, 13-year-old and watching, he might have been older by then, maybe he was a teenager, watching the Joe Carter home run against the Phillies. And I wasn't trying to like, I just said, hey, RA, I was at the Joe Carter home run game. And he locked in. You were? I was like, yeah, I was 14 years old. And he's like, oh, tell me about it. And then after that, it was like, you go up and just shoot the breeze with him about anything. It's so weird how, you know, relationships develop when you cover players, coaches, managers through the years. There's this get to know you period that can last anywhere from a week to like a year and a half, 2 years. And then once you've kind of worked through that, it becomes a really sort of back and forth, hey, how are you deal.
Yeah, I was in the press box behind home plate, and I've told the story before when Mitch Williams was struggling to find the strike zone, and Joe Carter stepped in, and like just a moment before the pitch that turned into the home run, the touch 'em all Joe. Chris Wheeler, who was a former PR guy, who was by then had become a color guy, an analyst in their TV booth, but they weren't working because it was nationally televised, obviously a World Series game. I was watching from the old press box in a walkway to the seats, and Chris walked up beside me, Chris Wheeler, and he said, Richard, could we borrow John Wetland for an inning? And I looked at him because Wetland was at the time one of the top relievers, obviously, in the game. And I looked at him and I laughed. And the pitch came in, and Carter's home run left the ballpark, hooked into the left field corner, and Chris disappeared. He ran, but we still talk about it to this day whenever we see each other. I said, no, you still can't borrow John Wetland. But the Bassitt, I was going to tell about the Bassitt situation with the roof where he said that his brake changed and whatever. When he said that, it reminded me of R.A. Dickey. In 2013, we had spent spring training getting to know RA. So the guys that were down there for the entire spring were his confidants, and he was able to ask questions, and he trusted me by that time. So opening his first start at Rogers Center, was it Skydome then? No, it's still Rogers
No,
Center.
it's been Rogers Center since the mid-2000s.
So he gives up 2 home runs and he lasts 4 innings or whatever. You can look at the box score, his first start at Rogers Center. He gets me in the clubhouse after he's done his little scrum. He gets me at his locker in the club. He says, Richard, does the ball always travel like that with the roof closed? And I felt like saying, no, only when your knuckleball doesn't knuckle like that. but he was blaming the roof also. So it's not the first time. Bassitt isn't the first time that somebody has pointed skyward and not been pointing at God, but been pointing at the roof.
Opening day 2013 was that game. And that's where, you know, in the days before Fitbit and the Apple Watch, JP Arancibia got about 20,000 steps in running back to the backstop in the first inning because he couldn't handle that knuckleball.
JP Arancibia talked his way onto Team USA for the World Baseball Classic as the only guy who could catch R.A. Dickey because he caught him in the regular season. Otherwise, there would be no JP Arancibia on Team USA.
And clearly Team USA did not consult with Dickey.
Right. And before the 2013 season, They both live in Nashville, I think still do. But Aaron Sibia was bragging about getting together with R.A. Dickey every week to get used to catching his knuckleball. And then asked Dickey about it, and the bullshit buzzer went off because R.A. didn't remember, like Grant Balfour didn't remember pulling him out of the river.
It's like, what? What?
He is,
Yeah.
if you're going to write something, don't try and double check because you might be disappointed.
Yeah, you might. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And Aaron Sebia should
I
know. "Hey, I'm gonna go ask RA about this too, right? Like you know that. You know that. All right, Griff. Well, we'll slowly begin to put a wrap on this. Griffsthepitch.com is Griff's website. You can go there, throw him a subscription, and you get a ton of great baseball content, multiple weekly columns, a weekly power rankings column, great conversations with current and former Blue Jays, former Montreal Expos, which are all archived. So if you aren't familiar with that, griffsthepitch.com, and you can just rifle through them over a period of time. There is a lot there and a lot worth listening to. You also get the Exit Philosophy podcast at griffsthepitch.com. Some scheduling challenges this month for Griff and me means that as of next week, for the rest of this month for sure, we're going to come to you on Fridays. We'll drop new episodes on Fridays, and Griff and I both follow the NFL closely, love the NFL. We're Blue Jays and MLB focused. Probably at the end of shows now, though, you're going to start to hear a little NFL talk, especially because the Thursday night opener between the Ravens and Chiefs in Kansas City is 3 nights away as we sit here on Labor Day, Monday, September the 2nd. And by the time we drop our next episode, which will be Friday the 13th, there will have been 2 Thursday games in the books and an entire NFL Week 1 weekend in the books.
I'm thinking starting next Friday, we go 3 best bets from Scotty Mac for the Sunday games and 3 best bets from Griff for the Sunday games.
Okay. Well, I will offer this
shortly.
I will offer this about this coming weekend as a non-betting expert and a diehard 49ers fan. I couldn't even begin to tell you whether that Monday night game is going to go well for my team or not go well for my team. And if you tell me the Niners blow the Jets out, wouldn't argue with you. You tell me the Jets don't blow the Niners out, but win the game and control it the whole way through, wouldn't argue with you. Also back and forth, kind of comes down to a last-second field goal, wouldn't argue with you. I would stay away, at least from the point spread of that Niners-Jets game.
There's an interesting prop bet of Aaron Rodgers over under 4.5 snaps.
Just a second. Let me call Mr. Bosa here. Nick, you going to get to the quarterback in the first 4 plays? You know, that might determine it. Oh, and the Niners play on natural grass, so the turf monster won't get Rodgers probably on that Monday night.
But this is a great time of year for sports, great time of year for sports fans, and we look forward to coming at you at our new scheduled time on Friday next week. I don't even know what date it is, but we'll figure.
It's Friday the 13th, Griff.
Oh my God.
Friday the 13th. Maybe Michael.
Unlucky already on this show.
maybe Michael Myers will make an appearance. I got that right? Freddy Krueger's Nightmare on Elm Street and Michael Myers is Friday the 13th. I got it. Good. Okay, I just have to check.
Maybe we'll have a theme day on our YouTube version with
with the masks.
Just don't scratch your nose.
Yeah, that's right. And with that, we'll put a wrap on it and look forward to talking to you again very soon. You can also get us at youtube.com/@exitphilosophy. Kids are going back to school. You may be off holidays, going back to work. The autumn's just around the corner. Routines get back into full bore. Have a great week and have a great start to the month.
Thanks, Scotty, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll be coming at you next Friday.